Hi there, and welcome to weeks 7 and 8 of online teaching in English 3. We are doing the last week and a half of our mini research project, our Stunt Journalism project. So, this will be the last video recording and the last assignment that is pushed out for you. So, now that you've done the stunt journalism and you've kept your journal and you've found some facts with some expert sources, now we're going to talk about writing the paper and creating the little mini presentation. So, the first thing we need to talk about is how to write a narrative research paper. This is based on famous authors like A.J. Jacobs, who's written a number of books that all use first person research and narrative research writing to write basically a long research paper that is really interesting. So, if you look at the way that he constructed this article here, he starts out by saying the hype over 3D printing intensifies by the day. Will it save the world? Will it bring on the apocalypse with millions manufacturing their own AK-47s? Or is it all an absurd hubbub about a machine that spits out chintzy plastic trinkets? I decided to investigate. My plan: I would immerse myself in the world of 3D printing. I would live for a week using nothing but 3D printed objects, toothbrushes, furniture, bicycles, vitamin pills, in order to judge the technology's potential and pitfalls. I approached Todd Lipson, a Cornell engineering professor and one of the nation's top 3D printing experts, with my idea. He thought it sounded like a great project. He said it would cost me a mere $50,000 or so. Instead, I settled on the idea of creating a 3D printed meal. I'd make 3D printed plates, forks, placemats, napkin rings, candlesticks, and of course, 3D printed food. Yes, cuisine can be 3D printed too. And in fact, Mr. Lipson thinks food might be this technology's killer app. Of course, the revolution isn't here yet, at least not for home users. According to an industry consultant, Terry Wohlers of Wohlers Associates, only about 68,000 consumer printers have been sold. Most home users are hobbyists, and the geek factor remains high. The biggest chunk of the fast-growing 2.2 billion 3D printing economy is industrial. Obviously, this article is from 2013, so the facts are a little old, but you can see in this beginning to the article, it's interesting. He's writing in the first person, right? He says, I decided to investigate. He tells us what his plan is right here. Then he tells us that it's going to be ridiculously expensive, and so he alters his plan. But he also has expert sources that he includes, right? He has Had Lipson and Terry Wohlers, who he includes. So a narrative research paper is written in the first person, is interesting, has voice, even has humor. It talks about what you did, what the stunt journalism was, and it also talks about the facts surrounding the topic. So, how to use quotes from expert sources. What A.J. Jacobs did, if you noticed, was that he hyperlinked, right? Had Lipson hyperlinks and Wohlers Associate, he hyperlinks to his sources, but since you're writing a paper, instead, you are going to use quotes or paraphrases from expert sources. So, for example, I could say, according to industry consultant Terry Wohlers of Wohlers Associates, only about 68,000 consumer printers have been sold. So that is a paraphrase. I could also use a direct quote. Had Lipson, a Cornell engineering professor and one of the nation's top 3D printing experts, said, it sounds like a great project, but it would cost you a mere $50,000 or so. Or I could use a paraphrase. Yes, cuisine can be 3D printed too. And you'll notice in parentheses, I have the date of when that information was accessed. So I'm using in-text citations and signal phrases or direct quotations to talk about the expert facts from the expert sources. These are what in-text citations look like. The very first one, according to an industry consultant, Terry Wohlers of Wohlers Associates, only about 68,000 consumer printers have been sold. So according to Terry Wohlers, it's called a signal phrase. That is the author. I put it in the sentence. Then I have the paraphrased information highlighted in blue. And then in the parentheses at the end, I have the date of that article. And the final punctuation, the period of the sentence, goes after that last parentheses. If I want to use a direct quote, you see here with Had Lipson, I'm still putting his name outside of the parentheses, and I'm saying Had Lipson said, "It sounds like a great project, but it would cost you a mere $50,000 or so." That blue is the direct quote. Since I used a direct quote, I not only in the parentheses have to include the date of publication, but also the page or paragraph number it was published on. If you are researching and using a book or a newspaper or something that has page numbers, you would say page number. Otherwise, you just count the paragraphs. My final example doesn't use the signal phrase and instead just puts the author in the in-text citation. Cuisine can be 3D printed too. That's a paraphrase from a source. The source is Lipson, and I found it in 2013, or it was published in 2013. So that is how to easily format your in-text citations. Now we're going to go ahead and create a works cited. A citation for a works cited or your references page. I know that you've done this before, but it never hurts to refresh your memory. So this article here, Dinner is Printed by A.J. Jacobs. This is the article that I've been talking about and using in this presentation. So I'm going to copy my URL, and then I'm going to go to citationmachine.net. There are lots of citation makers out there, including EasyBib and ZBib, but Citation Maker has always pulled more metadata when I've used it. It's always been quite accurate, so I would stick with Citation Machine. So I only want to create citations. I'm not going to upload my paper. I want to make sure that I choose APA. MLA you've probably worked with before, but MLA is specific to writing in English classes and English papers. And although this is an English class, what you're writing is a research paper. It could be a scientific research paper. It could be a psychological research paper. So we're going to stick with APA because that's really what you're going to use for research. So we're going to click on APA. We're going to go ahead and make sure that we have the right kind of source selected. It's not a book or a magazine or a newspaper. It's in fact a website that we're citing from. And we are going to paste in our URL. It's going to do a search for us. It's going to pull up which one it thinks it is. And when it does, we can select it. We can verify that that is the correct source. So this is what it's pulled up right here. Dinner is Printed. Yep, that's the right one. So we're going to select that source. And once we do, it is going to autofill all of the spots that would go in a citation. It's going to tell us that it found citation data, it found the metadata for the URL, the website title, the publication date, the access date, and the title. So that's fantastic. So the only thing it couldn't find was a publisher or sponsor, but that's okay because the publisher sponsor of the New York Times is the New York Times. So we're not concerned about that. And so then we would click Final Step, and it will autofill all of the parts of the citation. So it autofills the article title. That's correct. We're going to double check this. Never assume it autofills correctly. We know that the author is A.J. Jacobs. We've got the URL. We know it when it's electronically published. And the date accessed, we accessed it today. So we're going to go ahead and click today. That'll fill it in. And then we create the citation. So once we do that, this is the citation that is created. We look at it. Yep, looks exactly right. Author, date, title, where it's retrieved from, and the URL. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, or I can do a copy of the whole thing like this, and then I will paste that right onto my document that I'm working on. And so that is how to accurately create a citation. All right, so, backspace. Your stunt journalism paper should be outlined in the following way, right? Your paper does not have a length requirement, right? It just needs to be long enough to cover these 6 items. So first of all, what question did you ask and why? Why did you want to do the thing that you did? The second part, what expert sources did you consult? What did you learn? Facts and in-text citations must be included there. You are supposed to consult 3 to 5 sources, and so you need to make sure that you include facts and in-text citations from 3 to 5 sources. What stunt journalism did you perform? Describe what you did. What were your results? You're going to describe the diary entries, the journal entries, the notes that you took. And then what was the answer to your question? What did you ultimately learn? After that, you will then include your works cited, where you will paste the full citations that you made of those 3 to 5 sources. Those citations should be in alphabetical order. So that is the stunt journalism paper. That is due at the end of week 7. You already have the majority of this work done. All you have to do is put your information in the correct order and paste those citations at the end in alphabetical order, and then turn it into week 7. The last part is your final project. You are going to record a short video in Flipgrid, and I know that some of you hate Flipgrid, but a part of English language arts is speaking and listening, and part of the speaking skills, because we're not face to face. Instead of doing live presentations, you're having to do video presentations. So you do not have to create an actual, like a Google presentation. You can just record the video of yourself. But these are the things that you need to answer. The question you asked and why, the expert sources you consulted and what you learned, the stunt journalism you performed, what your results were, and what the answer was to your question. So for the last couple of days of the semester, you'll record that video up in Flipgrid. If you notice the hyperdoc that I created for weeks 7 and 8. For week 7, fill out the survey, watch the video that you're watching right now, write the paper and turn it in. And then week 8, the last couple of days, record your video, and then fill out the end of the year survey. As always, you can always get a hold of me if you need to. You can reach me through email, through Remind. You can even find me on Facebook Messenger. But if you have any questions, make sure that you ask. But hopefully you have all that you need to do to have a successful end of the year and a successful research project. Thanks, and I will see you in Flipgrid.